American diplomats were in Syria today for the first time since the U.S. shut its embassy in Damascus in 2012. They met with Syria's de facto new ruler, Ahmed al-Shara, and announced that the $10 million bounty the U.S. placed on him would be removed. Assistant Secretary of State Barbara Leaf told reporters al-Shara was committed to ensuring that terrorist groups cannot pose a threat inside Syria or to other countries.
I would characterize the discussion as quite good, very productive, detailed. We ranged over a wide set of issues, domestic and external. He came across as pragmatic. It was a good first meeting. We will judge by deeds, not just by words.
U.S. officials also said they're expanding their search for Austin Tice, the American journalist who was kidnapped in Damascus 12 years ago. For perspective, we turn now to Theodore Katouf. He was U.S. ambassador to Syria during the George W. Bush administration. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Help us understand the significance of the U.S. dropping the $10 million bounty it had offered for the Syrian rebel leader whose forces led to the ouster of Bashar al-Assad.
Well, I think it's a very positive sign. Ahmed al-Shara at one point was an Islamic stater. At another point, he was al-Qaeda. Then he had his own offshoot in Syria, the Nusra Front. But he and the organization, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, seems to have evolved and recognized that they can't rule Syria, they can't govern Syria without changing, to some extent, their Islamic or Islamist ideology and being inclusive and much more tolerant, because Syria is a mosaic of many minorities, with the Sunnis perhaps being the majority, but within that grouping of Sunni Muslims, there are many secularists or many people who don't want Islamist rule.
What is the U.S. interest in Syria right now?
Well, I think the first interest is that it doesn't become a cockpit for exporting terrorism, as Afghanistan was. And the like. And Syria has ISIS still out in the desert, in the western desert of Syria. And the United States has about 2,000 troops there. We've recently increased the number of troops. And they are there to work with what's known as the Syrian Democratic Front, but is largely a Kurdish organization, military organization, to root out ISIS. And the Kurds actually guard some very huge prisons containing thousands of ISIS fighters and their families.
Is it in the U.S. interest, then, to lift sanctions, to provide more humanitarian aid, and to encourage other countries to do the same?
I think it is. I mean, Barbara Leaf, our Assistant Secretary, who we just heard from, it's her job as a diplomat to be positive and hopeful. But in this case, I think it's the right thing to do, because Ahmed Shara recognizes that he has a country in ruins, and people are suffering, and he has to deliver for them. If he wants to consolidate HTS's position in Syria and stamp out resistance, then people have to have hope. And that hope will come through the international community first providing humanitarian aid, but then reconstruction aid, and even help with governance. And Shara seems to me a very astute fellow who's learned a lot and come a long way. I'm not saying he couldn't reverse himself. Plenty of leaders have. Mm-hmm. I'm old enough to remember Castro in Cuba, who told us he was a Democrat back in '59 and '60, right, and turned out to be a communist leader. So people can say one thing and do another. Ahmed Shara not only has to talk the talk, he's going to have to walk the walk.
You've just articulated one of the immediate risks that Syria faces. What are some of the others right now after the fall of Assad?
Oh, there are so many, Jeff. The civil war is really not over. We have a truce between Turkish or Turkish-backed forces and the Kurdish forces I just referred to in northeastern Syria, but it's only a matter of days before that truce expires. So we could see, again, fighting in that area. Not only that, but we could see more extremist elements from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or other allied organizations trying to push Shara side because he's too moderate. We also have many other things that can happen. I mentioned ISIS and them gaining a bigger foothold and expanding their reach in Syria. And of course, Israel's been taking territory on the Golan that was supposed to be demilitarized in an agreement between Hafez al-Assad and the then Israeli government. And that's putting pressure on Shara too. He doesn't want a problem with Israel. He doesn't want to have to be a confrontational leader. But they're embarrassing him badly.
The outgoing administration is engaged in this frantic round of diplomacy, but President-elect Donald Trump has made clear that Syria, as he says, is not our fight. How might his anti-interventionist worldview affect the U.S. approach moving forward, and what might that mean for Syria?
Well, first of all, we have been working with the Kurds in northeastern Syria since about 2012. You had Ambassador Jeffries, I believe, on this show, who said we never had an agreement with the Kurds for an independent Kurdish state or even a quite autonomous region. But there was a moral obligation there. The Kurds have been abandoned more than once by the U.S. and the West. And if a slaughter takes place there, their blood is going to be on U.S. hands. And Turkey has said not only is ISIS a terrorist organization, but the Syrian Democratic Forces, i.e. the Kurds, are also a terrorist organization, something, of course, we don't agree with. Our interest is that Syria not be a totally failed state, and ISIS and other organizations, Al-Qaeda, not be able to export terrorism to the West and to Europe and the like. And if Trump pulls out too quickly, if he throws up his hands and says, I'm not giving any aid, let the Arabs worry about it, et cetera, without U.S. leadership, things could deteriorate very quickly. So I'm hoping his advisors can talk him into let's say, a more moderate withdrawal. Since he criticized the withdrawal from Afghanistan, we shouldn't repeat that.
Ambassador Ted Khattouf, thanks so much for your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.